So certainly for everyone, I am the business continuity and resilience guy. I love being the minority in the room. That's fantastic. And really what we've seen with our client base across the globe is COVID has accelerated digital transformation. You have organizations that deal in PII, especially in financial services and healthcare, that maybe prior to this year never had a fully remote or dispersed workforce because they had security issues around data, around does my employee have VPN access? Are they using their neighbor's Wi-Fi? What about split tunnel VPN? So just from a business continuity and resilience standpoint, we've seen it really accelerate companies to get comfortable with remote work, which is all about really digital security because they have to, right? A lot of companies, if they didn't transition to work from home, they wouldn't be in business. So we've seen companies accelerate that, and it'll be interesting over the next year or two to see if their security policies and practices catch up with where the business has pushed them over the last 10 months.
Push them. I like that. Or I'm a bit worried about that because it implies that this is definitely a push. Maybe some sectors, I don't know. I want to hear a bit more, find out if they were pushed or if they were already going to jump. Ricardo, what do you think? How has digital transformation occurred for you? Is it just expedited things that were already in motion?
I think so, Philip, and I totally agree with James' vision. I think enterprises were pushed to maintain operation in the middle of the pandemic, and that in most of the cases, if not all of the cases, meant to ensure that the employees were able to connect regardless of where they were located. Now that creates an implications from the security standpoint of view and the resilience standpoint of view, which is that traditionally most of the technologies that were preventing attacks to be successful were located within the premises. And now we have the employees outside of the premises connecting from local internet links, and in some cases, the neighbor's wireless link, like James just mentioned. And that visibility was all of a sudden gone. That visibility into attacks and that visibility into capabilities to prevent those attacks were gone. So that created a lot of complexity and challenges to the CISOs during the pandemic. But to answer plain and simple your question, enterprises accelerated what they had in mind, and in most cases innovated on top of what they already had in mind to ensure that they kept the business moving forward.
No, I like it. And everyone had to move forward, and some people were weeded out pretty quickly, or not. So at least that is something we can sort of reflect upon. We tried this event of this nature back in April. Maybe it was a little too early to see what was going on, but certainly it was interesting. Greg, you very kindly also spoke last year at the Miami Forum. What's changed? How has COVID done something to digital transformation?
Well, besides just isolating everybody, I have to agree with James and Ricardo. And also, we now have the challenge that every computer device is now a family device. You might want to keep your kids and your business and your family life separate, but when it's all in one place, it's hard to sell your kids when you're not on the computer that, hey, they can't use it, and they go to whatever site that they go to, and now you have non-business related, potentially unknown applications on your machine, in addition to what would be the normal, easy path for most security people to just limit it to business applications. That's one of the challenges that we see. And people also then, have their iPads and their own personal phones and their personal everything, which now get connected to the network because they forget which is their business computer and which is their home computer. And all of a sudden you have alarms going off because, oh, wait, we shouldn't have, one of those games that just grabs everything about you off your machine, connected to the business network. Even though as a personal computer, it's something you agree to, it's not something that the business had originally expected. So there's a lot of work-life integration that has also been a challenge, for everybody, not only the business, but for the users at home to get things right. And I don't know how many times you've seen webinars where 50% of the people get on and then the other 50% have to wait, as their internet is malfunctioning, or, they had a power blip at their house. Life is now getting in the way of business. So, that's a big challenge.
I know what you mean. And in the early days of American school kids working from home, you could clearly see at the EST start of the school day, everything went wrong. And then at the PST, everything went more wrong.
Right.
But I like that. David, welcome. Of course, on this panel, we've got people on the end user side, on the consultancy side, on the solution provider side. You're very much, David, on the MSP side. Tell us about the evolution for you. What has happened to digital transformation?
Oh, let me just say that. So first off, so we understand the market space that I'm typically dealing with. I'm typically in the range of 20 to 150 users. These are the size organizations that it does not make sense for them to have an internal IT department, and so they outsource that. And so I step in, and my team steps in to be that outsourced IT department. Something else that goes hand in hand with that size customer is essentially a complete lack of security. They do not think about security. They think the firewall they have from their ISP is a firewall, and that's security. If they had to think about security, they would say, yeah, we're like a hard shell with a soft, gooey marshmallow inside because everyone has access to everything. And so when you take that type of a mentality and people go home, well, just get them connected is all that really matters. We're desperate to get them connected, and that desperation creates some really, really terribly bad behaviors. Greg was just talking about it. When you've got, bless you, when you've got end user home environments where the kids have Fortnite and other games on it, and then they're also using that to access work over a VPN that's not properly configured. It's just set up wide open and blows them into the network. You're asking for trouble. And yet environment after environment that we've been taking over during this time, that's exactly what we found. We have found other IT providers who really probably should not be messing with security. Configuring VPNs as just a wide open pipe into the network. Because again, the way the customer runs themselves is anyone on the network has access to everything. And so they set up the VPNs the same way, and now you're connecting in home users. That's a terrible thing. So Phelim, your question is, what does this mean for digital transformation? My conversation with many of my clients has been shed the desktops, go all laptop. That's number one. So as people are considering their next lifecycle refresh, it's let's spend that extra dollars going to laptops. Well, that also means a change, because if they're using any type of a client server application in the office, and they've been doing some form of a RDP, whether it's terminal server, Citrix, RD gateway, whatever it may be, well, unless they're doing a server, if they're connecting to a desktop, well, if they replace that desktop with a laptop, then there's no desktop to connect to that client server, that legacy client server application. So it's also time to really kick in the butt and say, let's pick up and move to a classic web SaaS type offering. Get away from the old legacy. If it's a law firm and they're using something like Needles as an example, great legacy client server application. It's not an application for the future. I'm sorry, it's just not. It needs to be rebuilt from the ground up to be a legacy, to be a modern SaaS offering. When you think about that, whether I deploy my guys would roll their eyes, but I'm actually seriously thinking about talking about Chromebooks. I mean, what if I were to roll a Chromebook or any device out there as a secured endpoint that a person can carry and take with them, but their data is not on that freaking endpoint? I mean, that makes a lot of sense from a security perspective. It also makes sense from a support perspective. It makes sense from so many perspectives, and yet much of small business just is not thinking that way, which means it's going to be our job as leaders in IT, and that's an important function that we have to take on, of leading IT, not shoving security down someone's throat, but helping them understand there's an economic benefit to doing this, and security is icing on the cake. That's a much better way to sell where we need to go. And frankly, I think it's a better way to sell the whole concept of the digital transformation. It's showing them how they can be more nimble, more agile, and that means that that's hopefully going to lead to more money in their pocket.
No, I like that. I like that. And of course, if you're an MSP, everyone knocks on your door and says, please bundle my thing. And your question, of course, is not just how effective is it, but how am I going to communicate that vision? If I were to white label or bundle something or anything, it's the vision of digital transformation. So I like that vision, David. We have a nice comment in the audience. It said, Adam says he agrees very much with the model moving forward. He thinks we're getting away from on-prem, and he feels like businesses should be able to do business anywhere, anytime. Nice comment, Adam. Duran, are you on the call? I see you popping in and out. Well, no, I can't. I think Duran's dropped it again, because Duran's in Key West and he's got a bit of a hurricane thing going on at the moment. But when he comes back, we'll bring him in, because he's going to talk about the courts in the public sector side. Why don't I go back to you then, James? What should the CISO do now that it's not clear cut? The on-prem cloud debate isn't clear cut, and the home working from home, and people actually going to work, it's not a clear cut. So what is the CISO going to do to handle that?
I think one big thing that we're seeing right now is that end user education has to be greatly increased. With a lot of companies that are working from home for the first time or using their personal device for the first time, we're seeing a lot of companies get hit with phishing and malware and ransomware like they never have before. If you historically, Phelan, worked in an outfit we call butts and seats, right? We work with insurance companies where everyone's at a desk, everyone's at a desktop, they only use company issued devices, and they got a text on their personal cell phone that says, hey, this is your boss, I need you to do something. People would clearly say that's phishing. But we've seen a lot over the last months, as Greg and David and everyone talked about, now that more and more people are using their personal devices for work and blurring, like Greg, like I talked about, blurring those lines between work and personal. We had a client get hit with phishing 2 weeks ago through WhatsApp. Somebody was posing to be the CEO of the company, sending WhatsApp messages to people. Last year, that would have seemed completely ridiculous. But now companies are using so many alternate channels, Zoom, WhatsApp, Slack, all these free things, that now you're starting to see some people are like, oh, maybe it's plausible that my boss is sending me a WhatsApp message. So I think one thing a CISO could do, regardless of the size of an organization, or if you're not sure about on-prem or cloud, is that annual user training, that annual attestation is not cutting it right now. A lot of those trainings that we see were focused on, don't pick up a USB key in the parking lot and put it into your work desktop, stuff that's just not applicable now. And the successful phishing scams we're just seeing proliferate because it's preying on that bleed between work and personal.
Well, that bleed between work and personal. Greg, yes, please, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I want to add that I have seen a definite trend that when people read something on a small screen, they are much more likely to press it because you don't see the whole message. And phishing schemes seem to be much more effective now, that people will pick up something on their phone versus you see a full email on your desktop, it already looks a little peculiar. You know, they have a little something off that you can see, but you're already accepting things are reformatted on your phone to not look perfect. And you many times just click through on your phone where you wouldn't have clicked through if you were sitting at your desktop.
I think there's a corollary there too, and that is we've taught people pretty successfully to look before you click. You know, take your mouse, hover it over the URL. If it's coming from Microsoft, but the URL is I'm a Russian hacker who's going to take your money, well then you know it's not real. But they don't know to hold and press on that URL, or it's too much bother on their phone. They just don't think about it. There is something psychological about that device on a phone, especially where users are getting suckered in more and more. Good point.
That is a good point. I hadn't considered. Well, before I go to Ricardo, can I just see Duran? Are you on the call? I can see you, but I can't hear you. All right, not to worry. Whilst we wait for Duran, Ricardo, does that really resonate with you? How is the CISO of tomorrow going to deal with it?
I think it does, right? There's no doubt that the adversary is being seizing the opportunity. I think we at Lumu like to think that the adversary prospers in times of adversity. Why? Because he continues to attack enterprises remotely, as he has been doing that for the past 25 years. On the other hand, the CISOs have to embrace overnight this environment in which employees work remotely. So it's an asymmetric battle. While the adversary kept doing what he has been doing all along, the CISOs and the CTOs of enterprises have to react to enable overnight a vast infrastructure of remote access. That's number one. And that's why we see phishing growing at 600% this year when you compare with last year. That's why we see ransomware being so active, because they just have more chances to success. Why? Because as I said before, the layers of prevention, of protection were left behind on the on-prem world. The employees don't have those layers of protection nowadays when we work from home. Now, despite that fact, I think that CISOs have a unique opportunity to rethink the security that they need in a post-pandemic world. Like David mentioned, this concept of working remotely is here and it's going to stay longer. So it doesn't make sense to make decisions that doesn't go along with what the future is going to look like from the IT landscape point of view. So CISOs have the unique opportunity to reshape their cybersecurity strategy with the help of the MSPs, with the help of the experts. What are the tools that aren't adding any value in today's world, but will add value as we move into a post-pandemic world? What are tools that are underperforming? And what are new tools that enterprises will need to ensure that they stay ahead of the threat in the post-pandemic world?
Well then, Ricardo, because your tools are what you sort of you do. What tools will make the MSS or MSP of tomorrow? I know it's a bit of a broad, sweeping statement, but what's your vision?
That's a good question, Felon. We have held numbers of MSPs to enhance visibility into the threat landscape that the enterprises that they're serving are facing today. How we do that? We invented a concept that we call continuous compromise assessment. And I think it's fundamental in the transformation of cybersecurity. Continuous compromise assessment helps to assess with speed and precision if there is a device from your infrastructure, any device, a laptop, a mobile phone, an IoT, that is talking, so to speak, with adversarial infrastructure outside of your environment. If you had a device that is engaging in adversarial contact, you do not want that in your network. You do not want that in your environment, because what's coming next is a ransomware attack. What's coming next is an exfiltration, is a data exfiltration attack, and so on and so forth. So we help MSPs and enterprises to assess in real time if any of their devices that they have, if any of their assets, it's talking with adversarial infrastructure. If that's the case, then that's something that you need to eliminate with speed.
I like it. And Debbie writing in the comments, Debbie was actually referring to Greg, but I think it's equally applicable. It would seem that business tasks should be limited to desktops only. The rush for automation and productivity and solutions that let you do everything on your phone has caused some of these issues. So even though it was referring to what Greg said, I think it equally encapsulates what you said, Ricardo, as well, which I like. Now, why don't I ask David, maybe this is quite a fun question to ask. Is there anything special in the Miami, Florida sort of region with regards to the MSP of tomorrow? Has everything gone SaaS-based? Are people cutting out the middleman? What's going on?
We have better winters than the rest of the country.
Yes, we do.
I mean, hands down. So all cybersecurity conferences should take place in January, and they should be taking place on Hollywood Beach, Miami Beach, Fort Lauderdale Beach. And that's not new, but I'll get the plug in there. Okay. So we should definitely be doing that. Greg wants to come on down. Is this marketplace unique down here? I don't think so. It is unique only in the cultural mix that we have. We have a high population of folks from South America, Central America. So there's a definite international aspect to who and what we are. That comes with its own baggage and problems and benefits and you name it. So that's just there. And I think other parts of the country have similar things. You may not have it in Wisconsin, but you certainly have it in San Diego, for example, and you certainly have it in Texas. So there are plenty of other parts of the country where you have that same type of a thing. I think when it comes by and large, and again, with the customer base that I serve, again, that's where my head is. I'm thinking about those smaller customers. I don't know what it's going to take since we're talking about security and digital transformation, I don't know if they will ever really start to consider and look at security. I'm not sure that they will. And the reason why I say that is just look at your average homeowner who walks into the house and leaves the door unlocked. You know, if it's still in their own home environment, they don't have situational awareness around them. I mean, you think about from a physical security standpoint of what we ought to be doing, and we're blind to it. You know, people walk out looking at their phone and paying no attention to what's around them. They walk into a dark parking garage and they're paying no attention to what's around them. If we can't get people there, I really don't think we're going to get the small business folks thinking about security. That's not a bad thing. That's an opportunity.
It is an opportunity, and perhaps in this pandemic.
Yep, it's an opportunity, not just in this pandemic. It's an opportunity all the time, and the opportunity is most of the time. What I fear is reality is most people think about security when something happens to them, or something happens to a friend or someone that they know. When they see it on the news, they're numb to it. But if my friend Greg just got hacked and compromised, I'll give you an example. I got a note from a client of mine, 30-person law firm. I had talked with them about cybersecurity training. I had talked with them about a couple other services that they probably should add that are very inexpensive. And one of the other things I mentioned is they should speak with their insurance agent about cyber liability insurance. Flatlined, nothing happened. It was all, yeah, we'll get to that later. One of their colleagues, a 300-person law firm, got hacked, seriously damaged through a malware intrusion. And one of the partners found out about it, and I got an email. Hey, Dave, I remember you talked to us about some of this. We'd like you to come in and talk to us again. We think we need to take action. And that's the typical of what happens. Now, this is not the small business owner and they're dumb. This is human beings. So if we recognize that, then that means we have an obligation to our clients And we have a huge opportunity. And that opportunity doesn't come in like what I did and talk about at one time. That opportunity has to come with a continual education, a continual marketing effort. And that's really what it is. It's a marketing, not to sell them something, but it's a marketing to educate them and to make them aware. So that way, when they start to see signs or they start to get uneasy, they're connecting your name, your message to what they're feeling, and they're coming to you to say, Greg, you're the expert who's been talking to me for a year about this. I need to do something about it because my neighbor just got something just happened to them or something else. But this is an opportunity for all of us. And the larger organizations, they've got that internally, right? They've got a CISO internally who is thinking about that. He's on their payroll. The smaller ones don't. But all organizations need someone who is actively thinking about this and bringing it to the fore, because it's not human nature to really be thinking about it.
Well, that's perfect, and I think a lot of what you said, people coming to you after the breach, and the horse has bolted and all that is really a resilience question as well. I just like to mention my own reflection. There is some big platform that lots of MSPs use, and they never like the term security. They like the term resilience, and it's become apparent after various conferences recently and appointments that they're now very much into security. I won't say the name, but you know what I'm talking about. James, resilience, is it really the case, or are we just making fun of everybody for asking for help after the door is bolted?
No, so I'm a big fan of the term resilience and what it means. And I think it's applicable to what David talked about with Florida. And now I think we're seeing it applicable with the whole world because of pandemic. So being Florida based, like several people on our panel, everyone here is hyper focused on hurricanes, right? We plan for hurricanes, we prepare for hurricanes, we know how to recover for hurricanes. And right after 2004 or Irma, anytime there's a hurricane is when we're most ready for the next one. The problem with that philosophy for me is you're always looking backwards. And what happens when there's that next bump in the night? And there's always a next bump in the night. So what I'm concerned right now is I guarantee for the next 18 months, every company will have the most amazing pandemic response plan you've ever seen. And they'll be hyper focused on response, and that's preparedness and recovery. But resilience to me is look at all that's happened in 2020 outside of a pandemic. You had wildfires in Australia, you had wildfires in California, you've had civil unrest all over the world, and you have a pandemic on top of it. Resilience for me is when you take the security functions of your organization and you look forward. Are we able to handle the next bump in the night, whatever it is, not just the next known, because we won't have another big pandemic next year. It'll be something completely different that we're all talking about.
Well, I don't want to imagine what it is, but of course we need to imagine what it is. I suppose that's the point. We got some nice comments in the audience. Alex says Darwin and creative disruption at play, which is, I think, the Darwin Awards. Mike Godek says true. Haven't seen his help when he came in to do forensics. SMB still believe they're not a target, which I think is interesting. Well, talking about targets, Greg, what sort of targets have people created through accelerating digital transformation? Can you paint a picture, Greg?
Well, I think that we're looking at it with a little bit of a closed lens here. I see a lot of people working from home, but I also see in the retail, the service, the manufacturing, logistics, keep going. All of these sectors, we now have a more hybrid approach. There are people that still have to come into the office. They have to be able to do their business. And we're looking at the people who are in, accounting, finance, HR, all these support areas to the business. They're working from home. So you have, people who are coming in are still having to commute. They're still having to do things the old way. You can't manufacture something, at 500 different people's houses. They all have to come back into the shop. And so we still have to keep the old philosophies and programs in place. We can't just switch to protecting home workers. We still need the infrastructure that's in the site protected. And we have to look at it and say, this is really more of a hybrid environment. There may be some like law firms that can do almost everything remotely, but the backbone of America, the people that do real work, as opposed to us who are service people. And my most important decision was buying a good chair this year because I'm going to sit in it 10 hours a day. But we have to look at this and say there's not just the transformation to remote, but there's also the internal transformation of how we set up businesses now to handle the way we want workers to work going forward.
I like it because obviously, many people said, I don't want to, have a remote workforce, and now they sort of appreciating the cost dynamics. So maybe we'll see this hybrid work environment. I'm trying to keep up with some of the comments in the audience. Lots of comments about things people have seen on breaches. Please keep them coming. Ricardo, so you are neither end user nor MSP. So perhaps this is kind of fun to ask you. What's that dynamic going to look like after we all settle down? Are you going to see a raft of insourcing, outsourcing? Are you going to see embedded staff? What's the end user third-party relationship going to look like?
I think following one of the benefits perhaps that I have been on the vendor side is that we have to capture those drivers to make sure that we build the technologies that the end users demand and the resellers community or MSP communities feel confident that they can bring to their market. So during 2020, we have been surveying a lot the MSP community. Why? Because we want to make sure that our technology resonates with the MSP market, solves the problem to the MSP market, but at the same time to the enterprises. And that have helped us a lot to shape the product in a way that makes more sense to the MSP community. So how the MSP community serves, like Debbie is mentioning, a number of small businesses that don't recognize that they are a target in cybersecurity. Number one. Number two, the MSPs, the bad guys are targeting the MSPs because they know if they get access to the MSPs, they're gonna have the ability to go and get access to multiple accounts, to multiple enterprises. But at the same time, there is a lack of talent in cybersecurity. So that's something that the MSP community, as well as any other reseller in cybersecurity, it's a reality for them, right? So they need tools that help them to identify problems quickly, but tools that don't change the way they operate, tools that fit into the model they operate today. They're using Office 365, they're using, you name it, the tools that they're using. They also have a ticketing system. So they don't want to see another console of cybersecurity, another web portal that is triggering alerts. They want to see all that integrated within the tools that enable them to do the good job that they're doing to their MSPs. So as per drivers, I see the enterprises being more aware of the problem. If you look at ransomware, when Mace ransomware attacked Garmin, it becomes a news. But there are multiple SMBs that have been targeted by Mace ransomware that they don't make it to the news, but it costs money to the SMBs. A lot of money. Some of those businesses, they get affected and they go out of business. So we need to make sure that I see that as per trend, I see that the enterprises are going to be more aware on that front. resellers being more aware of bringing cybersecurity embedded into their offerings to their customers. Why? Because it helps them to sleep better at night. It helps for an MSP, it helps to sleep better at night, knowing that their customers are safe, knowing that the infrastructure that the MSP is using to serve their customers is safe. So that's kind of the trends I see in the market for it.
Perfect. And there's something I loved. You said, you don't want just another sort of alerting system or, federal thing that tells you, by the way, ransomware is happening. I know in several US states, it's possible to set up a local tax if you just get the local council to pass it. And some people have been creating a $2 tax just to tell you about local news that you could just Google on cyber. Maybe that's more of a West Coast thing, but anyway, that's something I saw. We're sort of out of time, but let me go back to you, David. What's your vision for the secure MSP of the future?
I think first and very, very soon, they need to get, the MSP needs to get his own house in order. There have been way too many MSPs this past year who have themselves been compromised, which in turn wreaked havoc across their customer base. If a MSP's remote monitoring and management tool gets compromised, that becomes a vector to go ahead and deploy malware, and now you're in the guts of every small business out there. I don't think small business is even aware of this, and frankly, the MSPs need to get that in order first. So before there even is, what does it look like in the future, they better get off their butts and actually take security really, really seriously. And that means implementing hardcore security standards in their very, very hardcore security standards in their own practice. Going forward, I think really what we're looking at is basic bread and butter. This is basic blocking and tackling. It's not a lot of rocket science. I mean, if we, my company, for example, last year, we just made a decision that we were moving every customer's G Suite or Office 365 environment to MFA. We didn't give them an option. We had asked, we had told, we had cajoled, we had educated, then we just told them. We told them, we gave them a timeline. They have 1 week. Here's what steps. We made it all self-service. And you know what? The help desk took a handful of calls from maybe 15, 20% of calls from customers whose people just, had some concerns, but overall 80% or more made that change. It was not difficult. We acquired 2 small MSP practices this year, our first acquisitions. Not a single one had MFA deployed. And we just, again, systematically just pushed it out. And we had a lot of pushback from those people. We don't want to change. We don't want to have applications on our users' phones, all kinds of stuff. And, it's when you put your foot down. I'll give you an example of putting the foot down. I've got a law firm, 30 people. 2 of his people came in and complained about putting an application on their personal phone. It's a free application, the Authenticator app. It's not a freaking big deal. And he looked at them. They had been with him about 18 years. And he said, I'm sorry, you've decided to work somewhere else. And I couldn't believe it. I picked up my jaw off the floor and I said to him afterwards, I said, that was really gutsy. And he said, listen, you've convinced me and I care about my security. I'm doing what you say to do. Now that was just because I had put my foot down with him. So he had the backbone to go ahead and deal with his own people. Doing that, frankly, and handling some of those basic blocking and tackling issues, I think will get us really far along the path. Is it going to be perfect? Is it going to answer everything? No. But it's like putting good deadbolts and securities on people's front door and back doors and side doors of their homes. If we just do that, we'll stop a lot of break-ins. I mean, It's not rocket science, and there's a lot that we could be doing out there.
I like it. I'm glad I asked you. You might have seen Duran has arrived. Duran, we're out of time, but would you just give us your reflections on what you've heard on this panel? Because it'd be great to get your public sector perspective.
Unfortunately, I've been in and out due to technical issues, but when you talk about putting an application on a person's personal phone, if you're in the public sector, that's not something you want to force on people. What happens is now that phone is part of public record. Doesn't matter if it's your phone, doesn't matter if the organization owns it, it's now public record. So you don't want to be doing things like that in the public sector unless you're providing, as an employer, you're providing those individuals phones. So that type of MFA wouldn't work in our organization because we have 100 employees and we're not buying 100 cell phones. And we don't want those devices used for government purposes for that specific reason. One of the other topics that I briefly joined in on as I was fighting through this technology issue is you were talking about deploying Chromebooks and things like that. So one of the things that we've looked at is more along the lines of WISE terminals. Our employees shouldn't be working on the road. The type of work that they do is more sedentary in nature. It's processing papers and documents and things, and we want to make sure that that is done in a controlled environment. And so having somebody process court case paperwork sitting at Starbucks is not going to fly. So we're looking at more along the lines of a WISE terminal with a VDI solution. That way the operating system and things are cached locally, but they're stored centrally, and that will help with the DLP issues that we're very concerned about. So those are the two topics that I did get to hear briefly as I was popping in and out, and those are my comments on those.
Perfect, perfect. Well, I'm glad we got to welcome you, because this panel is supposed to be a nice, diverse panel to set the scene for the whole event. We've got resilience, we've got vendor, we've got end user, we've got MSP, and we've got public sector. So it's been a bit of a tour de force, but James, Greg, David, Duran, and Ricardo, thank you very much. This has been a great panel. I look forward to seeing you in the audience, and please give everyone a lovely round of applause, or at least virtually.
Thanks, Phil.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate
right.
it, everybody. Thank you. Good.
I'll see you again in Miami. I promise. Perfect. Just moving everybody to the audience. Perfect. Well, thank you very much. What a start. What a start. We've got a lot of topics there, a lot of food for thought, but that was the intention of the first panel. Just flush the topics out there, get us thinking. Of course, we're still thinking about that end user, MSP, MSS relationship and the security for third parties. We are delighted to be supported by